can mutter now, they all mutter now. 3 times, Mr. Speaker, these Labour MPs voted against the national inquiry.
Now, did Kemi Badenoch have a complete meltdown in a new law? Yes, our Kemi-Kazi Badenough. Because on Monday, the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper made a statement in the House of Commons on the Kesi report, where her findings identified systemic failures in protecting children from grooming gangs, found evidence of overrepresentation of Asian and Pakistani heritage men among suspects in examined local data, highlighted inadequate data collection on perpetrator ethnicity, with only 37% of suspects had ethnicity recorded, and revealed institutional failures spanning decades. And the government's response: 12 recommendations being implemented, with legal changes making penetrative sex with under 16s automatically rape charges, expunging criminal records of child victims previously convicted, new national criminal operation led by the National Crime Agency to coordinate police response, and a national inquiry with statutory powers to investigate local failures and hold institutions accountable, and improved data collection with mandatory ethnicity and nationality recording for all child sexual abuse cases, with enhanced information sharing between agencies with mandatory protocols and immigration enforcement, including sexual offenders from asylum system. The scale of the current action: over 800 previously closed cases now under formal review, with 14% increase in removal of foreign national offenders, new mandatory reporting duties in the Crime and Policing Bill. She then made this apology and hoped that Kemi-Kazi Badenough would show contrition and make it about the children who were victims in these vile crimes.
When the final report of Alexis Jay's 7-year national inquiry was published in October 2022, the then Home Secretary, Grant Shapps, issued a profound and formal public apology to the victims of child sexual abuse so badly let down over decades by different levels of the state. As Shadow Home Secretary at that time, I joined him in that apology on behalf of the opposition and extended it to victims of child sexual exploitation too. To the victims and survivors of sexual exploitation and grooming gangs, on behalf of this and past governments and the many public authorities who let you down, I want to reiterate an unequivocal apology for the unimaginable pain and suffering that you have suffered, and the failure of our country's institutions through decades to prevent that harm and keep you safe.
Well, did she? Nah, she made it all about herself, as usual.
The Prime Minister's handling of this scandal is an extraordinary failure of leadership. His judgment has once again been found wanting. Since he became Prime Minister, he and the Home Secretary dismissed calls for an inquiry because they did not want to cause a stir. They accused those of us demanding justice for the victims of this scandal as, and I quote, jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Yes. A claim the Prime Minister's official spokesman restated this weekend. Shameful. It has been left to Conservatives time and time again to force this issue. 3 times, Mr. Speaker. 3 times. They can mutter now. They all mutter now. 3 times, Mr. Speaker, these Labour MPs voted against the national inquiry. They voted against it 3 times. Liberal Democrats didn't bother to vote at all, asleep at the wheel. Labour MPs voted against a reasoned amendment to the Children's Bill. At committee stage of that bill, they voted against. At committee stage of the Crime and Policing...
Well, she continued with her own self-importance, waving her arms about and made it all about her, and accused the government of a U-turn after months of pressure. And the Conservatives had nothing to do with all this, pointed to previous Conservative actions like the Jay report of 2014 with independent investigations into child sexual abuse, ethnicity data collection under 2018 from Sajid Javid, and claimed they accepted all recommendations except creating new Cabinet Minister role, and highlight Conservative Grooming Gangs Task Force that led to 807 arrests last year. Notes past Labour criticism of Conservative ethnicity data collection efforts, and highlights failure in Labour-controlled authorities like Greater Manchester, Rotherham and Telford, questions whether institutions can investigate themselves objectively, and then she moved on to demands for the inquiry, like must be robust, swift and independent, should examine role in ethnicity in crimes, should start with well-known hotspots like Bradford and Rochdale, must have power to scrutinise all officials, police, councillors, council staff, and should be completed within 2 years, should cover all 50 affected towns, and local inquiries need power to summon witnesses. And then after her grandstanding and arm-waving, she decided to ask some questions like, when did Baroness Casey submit findings and were any changes requested? Will officials who covered up crimes be prosecuted for misconduct in public office? Will perpetrators be prevented from making human rights claims to avoid deportation? And timeline for conclusions and actions. So no apology from our Kemi-Kazi Badenough. That was left to a Tory backbencher later on.
But I'd like to associate myself with the apology offered by the Right Honourable Lady to the House on behalf of all of us and all of the authorities that have failed young people so dismally. Those young people now want to know that they can have confidence and trust in the national inquiry and in who leads it. Can she tell the House who that is likely to be and what terms of reference they will have?
Home Secretary. The terms of reference will be set out in due course. We have not yet appointed or determined the chair for the national inquiry, and we will do so and set that out for the House. But can I also welcome his response on the issue about national apology for over historic and current the challenges that have been led to victims just being let down through very many years. And I think his response echoes the way in which the whole House came together in 2022 around a similar support for victims as well.
Like most Tory backbenchers behind her, clearly found her antics embarrassing and clearly out of order. But anyway, back to Kemi-Kazi. Clearly, she made it all about herself, because if it wasn't, why didn't she just leave this to the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp? Chris Philp. But what did you expect from an attention-seeking culture warrior? But fair play to Yvette Cooper, who must have been astonished by the fake outrage you were witnessing, because it will have been so easy to turn it into a scrap between her and Miss Irrelevance. But she didn't really. She just calmly exposed Kemi-Kazi's bollocks, and sorry for the vision that I've just planted in your head.
I have to say to the Leader of the Opposition, I don't think she can have read this report and the seriousness of its conclusions, because it sets out a timeline of failure from 2009 to 2025. Repeated reports and recommendations that were not acted on child protection, on police investigations, on ethnicity data, on data sharing, on support for victims. For 14 of those 16 years, her party was in government, including years when she was the Minister for Children and Families, then the Minister for Equalities, covering race and ethnicity issues and violence against women and girls. And I didn't hear her raise any of these issues until January of this year. She will know the Prime Minister didn't just raise them, he acted on them, bringing the first prosecutions against grooming gangs, calling for action to address ethnicity issues in 2012. And she will know that the Safeguarding Minister and I have raised these issues repeatedly. She referred to the Professor Alexis J. independent inquiry into child sexual abuse. I called for and strongly supported that inquiry, and also on a cross-party basis. We wanted that inquiry to work and supported its conclusions. But her party did absolutely nothing to implement those conclusions. Time and again, recommendations just sitting on the shelf, and it has taken this government now to bring forward the mandatory duty to report. And she says that we should ensure that people who have engaged in cover-ups should be prosecuted. I agree, and that is why this party is changing the law to make that possible, so that cover-ups cannot happen and so that people are held to account. She'll also know that the votes she's referred to, what she wanted to do, and the amendment she put forward, would have wrecked the children's well-being and schools bill. The very bill which includes two of Baroness Casey's recommendations strengthening child protection, recommendations that she and her party refused to introduce over 14 years. And I am sorry that she chose not to join in the apology to victims and survivors for decades of failure that was a cross-party apology in 2022. And it should be again if she really had victims' interests and the national interest at heart.
A national exposing of a fake outrage when it came to the J report and their lack of implementing the 20 recommendations, and also her bollocks about the amendment she tabled that would have wrecked the Children's Welfare and Schools Bill, no doubt about it. And that bill includes two of Baroness Casey's recommendations to strengthen child protection, recommendations that the leader of the opposition and her party refused to introduce over 14 years. And her attention-seeking clearly didn't go unnoticed from Labour MP Paul Waugh, who said her fake outrage was beneath contempt. Maybe she should just take a leaf out of the LIB-DEM spokesperson, Lisa Smart.
Mr Speaker, child sexual abuse and exploitation are among the most abhorrent crimes imaginable, and we must all support every effort to deliver justice for victims and to prevent these vile acts from happening again. It is, of course, right that the government follows the recommendations of Baroness Casey's report, including a new national inquiry. Survivors must be at the heart of this process. Their voices, experiences and insights must shape both the inquiry and its outcomes. And I would welcome hearing more from the Home Secretary on how she intends to ensure survivors are heard, respected and central to this view, building on their existing testimony without asking to repeat themselves and relive their abuse again and again. Mr Speaker, the 7-year inquiry into child sexual abuse, chaired by Professor Alexis Jay, delivered its final report in 2022, and the government at the time delivered none of its recommendations, leaving survivors waiting for justice. In her remarks, the Home Secretary mentioned two of Professor Jay's recommendations being introduced through the Crime and Policing Bill: mandatory reporting duty and aggravated offences for grooming offenders. But what does this new inquiry mean for the remaining recommendations of Professor Jay? Will victims and survivors see all 20 recommendations implemented while the new inquiry is being carried out? Any new inquiry must be more than symbolic. It must be robust, victim-centred and capable of driving real change. A duty of candour would require public officials and authorities to cooperate fully with an inquiry like this. So it continues to be disappointing that the government has delayed bringing this forward. I ask the Home Secretary plainly, what is stopping the government from introducing a duty of candour via a Hillsborough law now? Finally, now that Baroness Casey has completed her review, I welcome her appointment as chair of the Independent Commission into Adult Social Care. I trust she will bring to that hugely important role the same determination to challenge injustice and champion the voices of those too often left unheard.
The honourable member makes important points about the seriousness of this crime. She is right too that we need to continue to implement the recommendations of the overarching inquiry into child abuse. The Safeguarding Minister updated the House before Easter on those recommendations and the action that we are taking forward on those. I can tell her that a lot of the Home Office measures are already well underway as well, and we will continue to do that. It's really important important that we don't simply have recommendations sitting on shelves, that things have to be implemented. On the Hillsborough law, we are working at pace to get the details right and bring it before the House. She will understand that it needs to meet the expectations of the Hillsborough families as well as be right for the House too. And we will continue to work on the wider issues as well. Baroness Casey in her foreword says, if we'd got this right years ago, seeing these girls as children raped rather than wayward teenagers or collaborators in their abuse, collecting ethnicity data and acknowledging as a system that we did not do a good enough job, then I doubt we'd be in this place now. We lost a decade. We can't lose another one.
You see, Kemi-Kazi, that's how you do it. Don't make it about yourself. Make it about the victims. Ask the important questions. A fake outrage, I have to say, it was pathetic and painful to watch. She completely misread the situation and decided that her own political career is far more important than the victims. Why? Well, why didn't she just let her Shadow Home Secretary, Gulper Philps, do it? Or if you cannot trust him to do that without eating the cranes and, shoving the papers up his arse, maybe she should have got the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee to write and deliver the questions.
Can I thank the Home Secretary for her statement and for early sight of it. I'm pleased also that Baroness Casey has agreed to come before the committee tomorrow to set out her report more clearly to us. I'm concerned about the potential for inquiries trying to get to the truth, potentially prejudicing criminal trials. So could she set out how she envisages the two things running alongside each other, an inquiry and criminal prosecutions?
Can I welcome that question from the Select Committee Chair, and I am glad that Baroness Casey will have the opportunity to set out more details of her findings. As the Chair will know, the Baroness Casey has huge expertise and determination and will be forthright in giving the evidence that she has drawn together. She makes a very important point, and it will be important for the Independent Commission, for the Independent Inquiry, to have arrangements with police forces to ensure that where there are current criminal investigations underway, they are not cut across, but so that we also ensure that we can uncover where there have been institutional failings, because it's those institutional failings to pursue action or to turn a blind eye towards action that need to be pursued in particular areas as part of those local investigations and as part of the national inquiry. She'll know that these kind of arrangements have been done in inquiries in the past, so they can be done and will need to be so again now.
I might actually watch that the weekend when I get a chance. Could be interesting. But there you go, Kemi-Kazi. Again, someone asking questions on behalf of the victims and not for their political career. But there was another one who decided to make it about themselves, was Ashfield's very own Munter, 30p Lee, because through his own fake outrage, he was amazed and staggered that the Labour government can come here today and welcome an inquiry when they all voted against one. Then argued that the victims had been ignored over years and they have no faith in the system. Well, after he eventually got off his high horse and eventually got to his question, Yvette Cooper exposed his tiny little flaw in his self-aggrandising.
But they can regain faith if the Home Secretary agrees with me and appoints Maggie Oliver as chair of the inquiry.
Yeah. Well, I would say to the honourable member, the child sexual exploitation and abuse, some of the most vile crimes that our country faces. And what Baroness Casey's report sets out in some detail, set out over 17 pages, just report after report after review after report after review, and so many of those recommendations never implemented. So concerns that were raised at the time of the Rotherham inquiry about issues around ethnicity, about issues around lack of information sharing, about lack of protection for children, simply not acted on. And Baroness Casey herself says, if we'd got this right years ago, seeing these girls as children raped rather than wayward teenagers, then I doubt we would be in this place now. He was a member of the previous government that did fail to do this, and I would hope that he would agree that actually successive governments, successive agencies across the country have failed to act on this, and we need to make sure that there is a proper independent inquiry, as well as, most crucially of all, the action by police to take the operations that will bring perpetrators to justice and put them behind bars.
Yes, 30p, Lee, you were in a party that were in power at the time and you did absolutely nothing about it. Also, notice a certain frog-faced racist is nowhere in sight again. Clearly our Nige really doesn't care about children's lives ruined by child exploitation, eh? Let's be honest here. The children who are the victims of these vile crimes have been badly let down, haven't they, by those who were supposed to protect them. You know, we teach children to tell the truth, don't we? Yet when they did tell the truth to those who were supposed to protect them, they were practically ignored, ridiculed and let down. And no party comes out of this sorry mess with any credibility, do they? You know, the previous Labour government should have done more, as well as the Tory governments of the last 14 years, and quite possibly this Labour government could possibly have brought this inquiry earlier, so who knows on that department. But the party that had the one certain Women and Equalities Minister, Kemi Badenoch, whose job was it to implement the 20 recommendations of the J report in 2022, they did nothing. Absolutely nothing, did they? And I wonder where she is right now. Oh, that's right, leader of the opposition, eh? So I think they should really just sit this one out, because they have no room to criticise anyone on this either. But what do you guys think? Is this new law for Kemi-Kazi bad enough? Or you may actually think that her making this sensitive subject all about her was the right thing to do? Well, if you do, let me know down below, and I shall bid you farewell and take care, my friends.